So let's get into this. What was you're more fresh off of it than I am because you just watched it before we
Yeah,
started doing the
before we came
stream.
on.
So you go ahead, you tell me everything that you thought about it, and then I'll jump in whenever. I want to hear your initial thoughts though.
Um, the first episode, I was a little bored with.
Same.
Again, beautifully shot. Like it looks amazing. It looks like I mean, it looks like it should be on a movie screen. It looks incredible. But they really slow played that first episode. Um, there wasn't much that happened. It didn't feel like much happened. Like there, it was even jarring. Like she's leading this expedition of elves in search of she's trying to follow the path of Sauron and make sure he's extinguished or whatever. And we did say spoilers, right? Yeah, I guess all of our shows are
Oh yeah, and
spoilers,
just
but
spoiler.
yeah.
It's in the
But she's
title.
but she's leading this path of elves, and like they get to some point where they fight. What did they fight? What was that frost snow giant
No,
creature they fought?
the frost troll, snow troll.
Snow troll. They fight the snow troll, and and they're like, we shouldn't be going on. And then she says something. She's like, no, we're going on. And the one guy says something like, well, then you're going alone. And then they raise their swords up, and then they set them down, and then it cuts. And I'm like, what the F just happened? And then all of a sudden they're back, in at their home base
Oh
or
yeah, and
whatever.
she was too. I was surprised that like I
Yeah,
honestly
exactly.
thought that in that scene he was gonna keep going.
I
The way
felt
they
like we
cut
missed
that.
something.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but
Like
then all of a sudden they're all just back at the Elf Kingdom. Like,
to
okay.
be quite honest, when they showed her back at the Elf Kingdom, I was like, who the F is this? Like, this woman looks exactly like the woman that was leading the party, but clearly she's not because the woman that was leading the party was all in on going after Sauron. Like, there's no way she came back. And then all of a sudden
Or
it was
did
like, no,
she?
no, she did. And so that was very disjointed, and like it took me a minute there to figure out what exactly was going on. Like I don't understand. So like their threat of not following her was enough for her to break it off. Like I it's
Well,
very that
I'm gonna throw this at you real quick, and then I'm gonna put the camera on you while I go get a drinks. But this
nice
is the one
graphics. I
thing
like that.
I know.
By the way,
I
I
spent
hadn't
a
seen
lot of
those yet.
time getting
Nice.
these
Those look
going, and
good.
I did the She-Hulk ones too. If you notice
Nice.
here, if you look at this one though, I'm pretty proud of this, right? So since you brought it up, if you look at the middle of the ring, I have
Okay.
Sauron's eye up in there.
I
Yeah, I got the
nice.
eye in there. That
Nice.
was a last minute. I had this awesome graphic I found of it was like I forget what it was, but it's Sauron's eye, and then like it's got the Nazgul like in a triangle, like formation underneath the eye, and like the Witch King is in the front holding a sword down like this, right? It was a super cool graphic, and I wanted to use it somewhere, but then I inevitably like just pulled the eye out and was, like, trying to, like, put it in, like, it just looked fucking cool, and, like, this is the one little bit of that graphic I got to use, and, like, I thought that
Mhm.
ended up looking really good. Nevertheless, though, um,
You were gonna
the
ask me something.
yeah, the one thing that I will say that really like, I'm not the only one who thought this, I've seen a lot of people talking about this, is that the first episode, like you kinda said, was boring. It was, but then one thing that stood out to me, they just hung on shots for way too long. And, like,
Yeah.
there was just like, dude, this whole thing, like, this scene didn't need to be in the movie. Like, this whole thing, all it did was you caught up to this freaking conversation here for the whisper in the ear and don't hear what they say, the audience, and then just to cut back at the end to the saying of whatever it was, it didn't even it really wasn't even relevant to the time. Like, whatever her brother said, it was something about, like, you don't see the darkness, or you have to go all the way to the bottom to see the darkness, or something like that. But
Yeah.
that wasn't relevant to her, like, looking down at the water and deciding to jump in the water and not go to the light, like, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I get what they were going for with it because, like, she has seen the darkness because she's been searching for Sauron, but she
Yeah.
herself hasn't actually seen the darkness. She hasn't even seen Sauron yet. She's been chasing a ghost.
Mhm.
So, like, even metaphorically, what they were going for doesn't actually work when you try to make it like, when you try to apply it practically, because
Yeah.
she actually hasn't really seen the darkness yet. She got her first whiff of a sign left for orcs. She didn't come
Mhm.
across orcs. She hasn't seen orcs in centuries. Nobody has. So it's just like it was completely irrelevant. It was just stupid. But like they just
Yeah.
all this scene like this was like a 5 minutes of the show just to get like we didn't need this. We just didn't need it.
Yeah, so my belief is that this entire scene, the reason that they spent so much time on this was because they were trying to establish her motivation. They were trying to establish how close her brother was to her, and that because the entire crux of the show, at least as far as her character is concerned, is that her entire motivation hangs on the fact that her brother was killed. So if
Mhm.
you don't establish that relationship. And I'm not saying that they did it well. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that if that in their heads, I'm sure that they were, if you don't establish that, then the show kind of becomes. And I don't think they necessarily did it. I think that may be kind of one of the reasons why it was boring. It was hard to buy into her and feel like I don't know, feel like a lot of like concern or get where she was coming from.
Well, they could have just literally done they could have just shown the she could have had the dialogue that like the monologue that she was giving, and it could have started
Mhm.
with the battle. Honestly, most people here's a good point for this too. Most people consider like most normies out there, right? And I'm even technically kind of one of them because I said when we were talking about Game of Thrones and versus Lord of the Rings and whatnot, like I never read the Lord of the Rings books.
Yeah.
I read the Game of Thrones books, never read the Lord of the Rings books. But most people think of the Peter Jackson films as the, canon, as Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings canon. Most people are gonna be thinking of that more so than the books. So,
Mhm.
to that point, I feel like it would have been kind of more poetic for them to open up the show with the monologue over her brother's battle scene,
Mhm.
just like like Peter Jackson started Lord of the Rings with the flashback and Galadriel's monologue over the final battle we're going to see in this show that takes place at the end of the Second Age where they beat Sauron. Like, so I feel like they could have done that and people would have been like right into it. You would totally understand it because Galadriel's telling the story. Her brother died in the battle. You see the battle, and now she wants revenge on Sauron, and there we go. I don't know. Just would have made more
Yeah.
sense to me.
Well,
And
and I feel like fantasy shows lend themselves to flashbacks and lend themselves to cutaways from the main narrative to show stuff much
beautiful
more
shots,
so.
though. Again,
Oh yeah, definitely. They
I'm
lend
gonna run and
themselves
get a
to that
drink real
stuff.
quick, but you keep going.
Definitely, definitely. They lend themselves to that kind of thing more so than dramas or other types of shows. And I would have appreciated, at least for this episode, if they would have incorporated some sort of explanation for what the interrelationships were between all the different races. Like we understand that humans hate elves or seemingly hate elves, but we don't really know why. Like it's not really laid out as to why humans hate elves. And I think that kind of disgust or distaste for each other is kind of mutual. I don't think the elves are particularly fond of the humans. Um, and so I think like Rob was saying, being a kind of a normie, I wish that they would have given more of an explanation for why those relationships and feelings were there, because they're just kind of told to us, and I kind of I don't know. I feel like they could have done flashbacks explaining why the different races had this animosity toward each other. They clearly are all divided up. They're all with their own people. There's not, you know, areas where they all are together. But yet at one point it seemed like they all fought together against Sauron. So um, yeah, some of that was challenging. Um, the episodes are long, and like Rob was saying, like, they hang on certain scenes for maybe a bit longer. I'm not sure if they did that because they felt like they needed to have episodes that were similar in length to Game of Thrones, if they're trying to replicate the Game of Thrones formula, and so they were trying to get to a certain runtime for these episodes just so that they could be in the same ballpark as Game of Thrones, but it definitely felt like they something that they could have edited quite a bit and made these shows a little more tight
They
and a
could have
little
been
more,
tighter,
yeah.
especially
I was
just given how slow the first episode felt. Like, I
yeah.
feel like they're this because I mentioned it before, like, they just it seemed like there were just a lot of shots. There was one shot, I can't remember if it was in the second episode or the first one, but it was with the Harfoots, and I swear to God, the conversation was over between these 2 characters, and they just hung on this person's face, like, that was the scene. Like, I was like, the
Yeah.
scene ended way like, it was over already, and it was literally just like this like, I don't know, but that one stood out to me because in my mind, I was already thinking they were spending too much time on some scenes anyway, so it
Now,
was just weird.
I will say the big panoramic shots that
They
they
look
clearly
amazing.
spent a ton of that look amazing. I get the inclination to hang on those shots for a little bit longer. Like,
Those ones
those
are
are
fine.
amazing shots. Those are
Those are
fine, but
good. I
you're exactly
support
right.
those.
Like, there was, the beginning of
Even
the
this
second the
scene
be
on the boat, like, they just like, we knew she was gonna get off the boat.
well,
We
in the beginning the be I was gonna say the beginning of the second episode when she's in the water, like, they hang on her just in the water by herself for, like, 30 seconds, and it's like, "Okay, we get it. She's adrift. She's alone. She's, like, out there at sea," but
I mean, yeah, and then I don't know. I don't wanna just shit on the show, but, like, I wasn't and it's not fair it's really not fair to compare the 2 shows being House of the Dragon and, this show, because they're entirely different shows, right? Like, they're just totally different, but it's gonna happen because it's
they're
2 high
both
fantasy shows.
fantasy, yeah.
They're on at the same time, the comparisons are gonna happen, so let's just get that out of the way before, because everyone's gonna compare it, right? And like I said, I don't wanna just shit on it and seem because I've already established that I prefer Game of Thrones fundamentally, regardless of, anything that happens in the show. I just prefer
I
that
I
world,
I
so
Yeah, I feel like it does deserve some comparison though. I mean, like it's not to take an old cliche, it's not I don't feel like it's necessarily apples and oranges. It's maybe more like apples and tangerines. Like they're gonna be kind of close because they're in the same genre to a certain extent. I mean, you even have a dragon show up in the opening battle in the Rings of Power scene, and so you know, I think the comparisons are fair, even if they don't necessarily come out favorably for Rings of Power. That maybe that I mean, I would hope that the Rings of Power will step it up, that it will become a more engaging show. Um,
that's the thing, I don't think it will. I really don't in some ways because it's not going to be as like, there's not gonna be as many interpersonal dynamics, right? Like, in here's the thing, we've seen 2 episodes of House of the Dragon, and we've seen 2 episodes of this show, Rings of Power,
mhm.
right? I bet if I ask you right now, if you which one, like, you, for one, know more about all the characters, and how like, do you know more characters in general, and how much do you know about all the characters and their motivations? And then, do you see clearly kinda where the story is going? I think you could answer all of those for House of the
House
Dragon,
of Dragons, yeah.
but not for
That's a
this
great
show.
point. Yeah,
Like
that's a great point. Like, you know the characters' motivations and stuff for those other shows. This
yeah.
show, they are slow playing all that very much,
Mhm.
and,
And
like
that's
and I
we
don't
don't
know
know if
why.
I don't know if it technically is, because 'cause I've heard this comparison, it's true. There's a difference between a slow burn and just slow. And, like, I fear this is just really gonna lean more towards slow because of the scope. they're trying to do like this big massive thing, quote unquote, and they're spending a lot of time on like the scenery and all this stuff. And I worry, and just based on the nature of the what they were able to adapt from the source material, they don't have a ton of they don't have dialogue between characters that they can use. They just flat out don't. Like, and they don't have Tolkien whispering in their ear, guiding them on what to do, like they have George. Because in House of the
Yeah,
Dragon, they don't have dialogue between characters either. But George R. R. Martin is literally there whispering in their ears, telling them what to do.
yeah.
And I fear with this is trying to be more of a big, large scale, high fantasy, big visual kind of thing, and really only going to focus on a couple characters. And the stuff that we're getting, like, you got to think in these 2 hours of the show, we really don't have a clear indication of where the show's going. You can assume the main characters are Elrond and Galadriel, but like, who the fuck knows? We spend a lot of time with the Harfoots, like,
Hmm.
so I presume that at least Nori is going to be somewhat important. For how long? No idea. Um, but I'm just worried we're because the show isn't built upon character interpersonal dynamics like Game of Thrones is built around that. Like, the fantasy stuff takes a back seat in Game of Thrones. That's the setting.
Hmm.
Like, and the story of like in House of Dragons and Game of Thrones is always the politics, the personal character relations, and then all the other stuff just kind of plays out in the background. This is the opposite. And I fear it's gonna lean too much into everything, like that's the big fantasy stuff, and
Hmm.
not be as compelling character wise. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I already get that. Like, if I compare the Game of Thrones show, like the original series, which again isn't super fair because there's like 80 hours ish of that, but if you just look at a sample size of the Game of Thrones show and compare it to the Lord of the Rings movies, you get to know the fellowship and stuff kind of, but you don't really know all of their motivations quite like you do the people in Game of Thrones. Like,
Sure.
it's not really about getting to the nitty-gritty with Boromir and Legolas, and like, you know the basics for these characters, right? You know that there's like, you know Aragon's a good dude and whatever, and but you don't really know what makes him tick. Like, and with Legolas it's kind of the same way. Like, you do with Frodo and Sam, you get a lot of it, but, like, outside of Frodo and Sam, I don't know, I don't know if there's a really good argument to be made that you, like, really fully understand Gandalf, right? Is Gandalf
That's
a relatable character? Like,
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
a really good point. I think that and I've never thought about it in that way. Like, that's one of the things that I think Game of Thrones does brilliantly is that it takes its characters and it puts them into scenes or scenarios or situations that aren't part of the main storyline. But yet through those situations and those interactions with maybe characters you'll never see again or characters that are in it very sporadically, it reveals something about the character itself. It reveals the nature of the person and the character. And then later on, when you see them interact in more of the main storyline, their motivations are more fleshed out and revealed and make more sense.
Oh, and it's
Um,
clear,
and
right? You know exactly what if when you towards the end of Game of Thrones, especially when you got Tyrion and Jamie and like just I'm throwing just names on the wall, but if you got Tyrion, Jamie, and Daenerys and Jon Snow and all these main characters in a room, you would almost know what they're gonna do before you
yes,
see anything happen because
yeah,
you
and
just know so much about them.
that's why I think the finale of Game of Thrones failed so spectacularly because there were character turns that didn't match. It was so jarring to see these characters make some of the choices they did. But that's something
Mhm.
that we've talked about a million times. So, but I'll say so this is a great example. Like the ending scene or the scene with the what's her what the main woman
Galadriel.
Galadriel. Her and the guy that's on the boat that picks her up again after the sea monster is attacked. It's just the two of them on the
Oh,
boat,
yeah.
and through their interactions, they're clearly establishing the dynamic between the two, but they're not revealing anything about the characters themselves or their motivations in those scenes. Like they I get that the two of them are hesitant about each other and are a little confrontational with each other, but I don't feel like there was any that would have been a perfect opportunity to reveal something about the characters and nothing. There was no movement on that.
Well, and to that point, we should, as an audience, have already known at least something about Galadriel and what like she would be doing in that situation. But even after a whole hour of time, she's like the main person we're with, right? The show starts with
Sure.
her and then it
Yeah,
ends
yeah,
with her. So like for at least the first episode, Galadriel's the main character, and then in the second one, it's more Elrond's story. But even in those scenes, it's like you vaguely, I guess, get you honestly, you really don't get what she's gonna do because we had the scene like we talked about before here in the cave when they
yeah.
fight the troll, they all leave, and then we
We expected her
presume
to yeah,
yeah, like, we expect her to stay, but then she didn't stay, so then, like, you're like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess I don't know this character at all." That goes against everything you just set up, like,
yeah,
because like, you set up that she was gonna stay, like, when they were going through this snowstorm here, she didn't give a shit about the rest of her crew here when they wanted to stop, she's like, "No, we're going," and they're like,
yeah,
"No, I need to stop," and she don't care.
yeah,
But then just to have it, like, right after this scene happens, well, I guess she doesn't care anymore either. But then she
yeah,
jumps off the boat, and it's like, "Okay, so what is she gonna do?" Like, and I've heard some people say this too, and, like, I kind of agree. I don't know. It doesn't really bother me all that much, but, like, some people don't even really find Galadriel, at least the way she's been portrayed so far, as a very, like, likable character yet, and, like, I kind of get that because she's just, like, kinda self-centered, like, and we really don't understand her motivations outside of she wanted revenge, but even to the like, what I was just saying, she was solely focused on her what she has defined as her duty, that she doesn't care about her fellow companions here. Like, they need to
yeah.
stop, they've been going outside of the boundaries of the king for some
To
odd
be hon
centuries, who knows?
to be honest, I can't
Oh,
think of a single
word 789, I don't know if it's here's the thing, it
oh,
could be Gandalf, but
good question.
Gandalf technically should not be here because he doesn't show up for, like, 1,000 years into the Third Age or something. So, I was talking to John about this off camera beforehand with the stranger, the more l the more likely character or characters for him to be is a blue mage, and I don't remember all the blue mages' names, so I don't know. It's most likely because more people like I was kinda saying before, those Peter Jackson movies are Lord of the Rings canon for most people. Their safe bet would be to just make that be Gandalf, so they would have another relatable character, but I don't know. It could be Gandalf, it could be Saruman, it could be Sauron, like, I don't know. I imagine
Yeah,
it will probably end up being Gandalf, but another one, because of the Fireflies especially, could have been Radagast, the wizard in the Hobbit movies who was, like, in the woods. They could make it be
yeah,
him because that's at least someone that people have seen. But I don't know. My if I had to make a safe bet, it'd probably be that they went with Gandalf, and I would be fine with that because I'm not a stickler for the Lord of the Rings lore. I haven't even read the books. Like, I don't really care. So if they want to make it Gandalf, it's fine. Just write it good and it can be Gandalf. It doesn't bother me. I would think it'd be cooler if it was Saruman though. But I don't know when Saruman I think Saruman's supposed to have come around the same time as Gandalf. Don't quote me on that, but I don't know.
yeah, they've got a lot. I mean, that was kind of jarring too, the introduction. Obviously, it was a very compelling, like, cliffhanger to end on. I have something to say about cliffhangers with this show too, but it was a very compelling cliffhanger to end on, for the first episode, but it was also like, okay, people are falling out of the sky, like, that was something that never happened in the Lord of the Rings movie, so it felt very, um I don't know. It was kind of odd when that thing crashed and there was a human inside of it because now you're bringing like space travel into it. Like I'm gonna need to figure out where this thing like if it was a meteor because it seemed like it was a meteor, but like then you're talking about like is this dude an alien? Like is there some weird aspects that it just brings into it by introducing him in that manner? Um, but yeah, I and the other thing was like this show has a like at least the first episode like they have a thing about making fire not be hot. Like, wasn't there a whole thing in the first when they're first going when her and her people
Oh,
she's like, "It's so evil, the fire won't burn you," or
yeah, in the
whatever.
cave or whatever.
In the cave, and then they get to this scene, and, like, clearly there's fire everywhere, and then the girl's like, "It doesn't burn." And I was like, "Okay, what is the deal? Like, can fire just be hot? Because that's kind of like a established thing in all genres of TV is that fire is hot. Like, well, I'm not sure why we're all of a sudden deciding it's
They're
not, but
they're Targaryens.
I guess everybody is now. I don't know. There's just stuff like that where like, okay, it works for one scene, but then to do it again in this scene and like for the whole thing for like there to be literally flames. Like if they wanted to make everything glow or whatever, but there were literal flames in this scene and I guess they had to get her down to the guy to touch him to get him to come up and absorb everything, but it just I really bumped up against that, the whole fire not being hot thing that happened twice in one episode.
It does seem like they did it just to have this cool shot though too. Like, cause like, they
Him
didn't
absorbing
need yeah, they didn't it didn't do anything for him.
no,
It's not like he absorbed the fire and then he felt better. No, he just instantly expelled the fire again
yeah,
and then collapsed. So it didn't they literally just set this whole thing up just to have a cool visual, it seems.
yeah,
Because lore-wise, don't really think it means anything,
yeah.
fire-wise.
I and I may be wrong about this, and you please, in the comments, you guys can correct me, or Rob, if you think about it, you can correct me, but I feel like Game of Thrones and now House of the Dragon does really good at having a good cliffhanger every now and then. Like sometimes sometimes episodes will end and it'll be like a good stopping point in the story. It'll be a good and then sometimes they'll have like a really like good cliffhanger. It's like, oh wow, what does that mean? What's gonna happen next? The
Oh,
second
yeah.
episode, the second episode of this series was like, okay, we need 37 cliffhangers to keep people engaged. You have the dwarves opening the box that you don't know what's in it. They don't they the played out trope of, what's in the box. And then
What in
you've
the box?
got the elf that goes into the caverns being consumed, getting grabbed by all the orcs and being pulled away. You don't know what happens with him. You've got the kid with the
With the
Sauron
sword?
sword or hilt or whatever that thing is, being maybe infected or his blood infecting it or something along those lines that is kind of like a cliffhanger. It just felt like every scene that ended that episode with a cliffhanger. I was just like, oh man, I get it. I'm coming back to watch the next episode. Like you can stop, you can give us just a natural break point with some of these characters.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, I'm not 100% sure of the lore. I was actually confused about this. Someone can please yell at me about this in the comments because, again, I didn't read the books for Lord of the Rings. But that sword, right? The only sword I remember getting broken was Sauron's at the end of the Second Age when Isildur cut his finger off, right? Like, didn't his sword break then, or am I thinking of something else? Because didn't they have the broken sword? Didn't Hugo Weaving's character, his version of Elrond, didn't they have that broken sword? Or they had a broken sword, and they showed it
Yeah,
to
I think so.
Aragorn, and then they say it was Isildur's? Is that just a completely different sword? Like, because it's like, maybe that's the sword I'm thinking of, maybe that's a different sword, and then it's not Sauron's sword, but then why did the sword restructure itself after the kid's blood got into it? Is that supposed to be the Witch King? Is that kid gonna grow up to be the Witch King? Or is that the Witch King's sword and somehow the kid's blood But I don't know. And then supposedly Isildur is supposed to be in the show at some point. So
Mhm.
I don't know if that kid is supposed to grow up to be Isildur, if it's a completely different kid or different person. I just don't know. And I don't know how long this series is supposed to go on for, like, as far as in show, in universe years is concerned, because we saw Isildur. God damn, that name is hard to say if you keep trying to say it. We saw Isildur in the original Lord of the Rings in that scene where he cuts the thing off and then he takes the ring and he doesn't give it to Elrond and throw it in the pit in Mordor,
Mhm.
so I don't know. But that's obviously like that's the very end of this show.
Yeah.
So like it's weird for them to I mean, I guess they kinda have to settle that stuff up, but if that kid is supposed to grow up to be Isildur, then that's a really long time from now. If that kid I don't know what the significance of that kid is, and I don't know what the significance of that sword is because it's kinda confusing, is the roundabout way. Is like,
Yeah.
I don't know, and the fact that they don't have this is what makes it more confusing. They don't have the luxury of being able to use the Similarian, however the fuck you say it. They did not have the rights to that. All they had were, like, these I forget what they actually call them, but they're like little excerpts that Tolkien wrote, and that's the only thing they had rights to. They don't have rights to the movies, they don't have rights to the books, they don't have rights to the Similarian, like, so they could really do whatever the fuck they want because they
Mhm.
can't directly reference exact events that happen in the other stuff. They just legally can't, which again is a very good reason why the stranger may end up being Gandalf, because that would be a way for them to immediately differentiate themselves from the other material that exists that they don't have the rights to, because now they're using Gandalf instead of X blue mage. And so it's just inherently different now because Gandalf's here,
But
that
if
kind of thing.
Gandalf wasn't part of the stuff that they purchased, then could they still use him?
Yeah, because the way like the IP stuff works, and especially when stuff goes into like public domain, for instance, like Thor, right?
Is
Thor
this
is a
public domain? Is this being made because it's in public domain?
I don't think this is in public domain, but it's
Okay.
the rights are similar, right? So like
Okay.
with and with an IP that goes into public domain, and this is similar because the rights they do have consist of characters that exist in other material, which is the same kind of thing as public domain, right? There's a
Okay.
pre-existing IP here, but the caveat is you can't use that character in any way that the other rights holder has. So like if Mickey Mouse goes into public domain, I can't have my Mickey Mouse do anything that Disney's Mickey Mouse did. Like I could make a Thor movie, but I can't do anything that Marvel does with Thor. Like
Yeah.
that's their thing. Like I can't reference that. I can't like it has to be entirely different. So if you replace the wizard that's really supposed to be here and make it Gandalf, you inherently can just change the story like just immediately just because well now it's Gandalf doing this thing. Even if it's
Sure.
similar, it's not. That's the one easy way they could kind of get away with it and still
Ro-
honestly just stick true to the actually what happens and just change like that small thing.
If if we have time later, I want to talk about that rights and public domain thing later on, something that came out this week.
The Winnie the
Um,
Pooh thing,
oh yeah.
I still haven't watched that trailer.
We can talk about it in a minute here, but so I will say I feel like I've spent the last however long we've been talking about this kind of crapping on it, and there was a lot of stuff that I I I don't know what the right word is. I that didn't get me. I wasn't. I was having a hard time getting invested in it. I will say this: they had some really good scenes. I thought the hammer scene that you just kind of clipped on.
Mhm.
I thought that was an interesting. See, that was something where like I felt like they did the interactions between the two of them. They gave good motivations. They gave good, clearly, the elves are kind of a more aloof race because they don't recognize that 20 years is a very long time for other races.
Mhm.
So that was a very good way to go about that. The explanation for why they were so confrontational with each other. I thought that was a really good scene. I also thought the scene at the end where the orc attacks the kid and the mom in the house was, I thought that was a very well done scene. It was intense. There was some suspense in that scene, like with the orc and they're in the two hiding spots. I'm not sure I quite understood what the mom's motivation was for getting in the closet and hiding rather than going and getting help, like the son had said. I guess maybe to stick around in case the orc found her son.
Yeah, I
But
think
that
that
was
was my interpretation, is that she didn't wanna
okay.
leave the sun. I did
Sure.
love, though, 2 things before I forget. The scene in the cave here, and in the mines rather, with Durin and Elrond, perfect
Yep.
example of actually executing good character dynamics and good
Yep.
character relationships. Like,
Yep.
you now understand more about Elrond and Durin than any other character in the entire show. Like,
Yep.
you know more about them than anything else in the way that they interact with each other, how much they care for each other. Like, you learned more about the even all of the dwarves with just their conversation at dinner than you did with anything about the elves and kind of where their hierarchy is. We know there's
Definitely.
a king, and we know, like, for some reason the king decided to send, like, her people to the west, but we really didn't get explained, like, why elves are, like, sent to the West. Like, it's supposed to be this, like, great thing for the elves, and yay, but, like, we really weren't told why. Like,
Hmm.
like, you may know from the books and, like, know, like, you have a basic understanding of it, but you don't really understand it in the concept of the show. But with this, you really do. And the other thing with the thing with the kid, I really loved the scene where she comes back with the head and just
Yeah,
lays it on there, and it's just
that
like
was
that
good.
was because to the contrary of me saying that they just keep hanging on scenes for too long, that was perfectly fast paced and, like, quick and to the point, like, he just walks in with the head, boom, we leave by morning or whatever, just like and then it's
Whoever
gone.
wants to come, yeah,
Yeah,
whoever
like,
wants to
and then
come, we're going.
end scene. It was perfect.
Yep.
That's how you shoot a scene. We didn't
Yep.
need to linger on the head, watch a big dramatic entrance up, or just hang on her face for no reason. Like, that's how you do it. That was good. I really liked that scene. That was really cool. But yeah.
Well, and I will say both of these things that we've just talked about now, or all these things that we've talked about, both came from the second episode, which means that there was an improvement from episode one to episode two, so that's where I said earlier, like, I'm hoping that Lord of the Rings finds its footing and like it's kind of, I don't know, they might never reach the level that Game of Thrones does and House of Dragons does, but I hope that they are able to lean more into the good aspects, things like we just talked about, than some of the other stuff they were trying.
Well, that's the thing, man. It's all about characters.
Hmm.
It's characters and story. And that's the one thing, like I said at the beginning, I'm worried about with this show because I just worry based on episode 1 more so than anything, and some things in episode 2, even though, to your point, definitely an improvement. Like, if every episode was like episode 1, I don't know if I'd wanna watch the show. Like,
Yeah,
it'd just be like I enjoyed seeing it, it looked cool, but, like, I just didn't care. I wasn't invested, I didn't know what the point was. It was just kinda jumping around. Didn't make any sense, but no, that just totally didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense to how it was executed. I get what happened, but, um, it's just about good characters and good story, man, and I just worry that they're gonna spend more time on, "Look at how amazing and big this is, and it's just high fantasy," and, like, what, but you're not gonna care about the characters, you know? I just because they're
yeah,
just like, "Oh, here he is, and he does this, and he's an elf," and you're like it's like with Galadriel, all we know at this point is she's an elf, she's good at fighting, and she wants to kill Sauron.
yeah.
That's all we know. And, like, they even alluded that she has some sort of kinship with Elrond, but they didn't like that was a one-sided relationship, it seemed. Like Elrond seemed to be very fond of Galadriel and want to like talk to her and be like cool with her and showed that he cared about her in some capacity. But Galadriel was just like, fuck you. Like, you're
Yeah.
gonna give me that
I
honor
wanna
through the
go find
king?
Sauron. Yeah, I
Yeah,
wanna go
like
find Sauron.
it's like, come on, man. Like, I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
those are like little things I just think they could have done a little bit better. And honestly, like I even thought that I don't know where they're gonna go with it, but like the elf dude, like he was okay. I don't know if there's anything about like this dude that's like important at all. No idea.
yeah, no idea.
Elrond though is so far like I'd rather at this point I would rather watch a show of just Elrond and Durin just hanging out.
Yeah. You know what, you mentioned earlier, like, you didn't like or like, the main girl. Um, I don't know that there was a single character, except for the dwarves. Maybe the dwarves, maybe Elrond, like, other outside of those that small group, I didn't care for any of the elves. I didn't really like any of them. No, the human characters, yeah, I find yeah, I have a real affinity for. I mean, maybe the elf and the woman because they're kind of like star-crossed lovers. That aspect of it is more something you can kind of look into. And like, I didn't dislike them. Like, I felt like, okay, maybe there's something there that could be interesting. But
We
there
needed
were
more
no
time with them, yeah.
yeah, I didn't like this guy and her, like both of them. I kind of came away feeling very blah about. I downright hated the humans basically as a race. I mean,
Oh yeah.
the elves weren't great by themselves. I mean, the only race that actually felt and I guess what do they call it? Harfoots,
Harfoots.
Harfoots. The Harfoots are, I guess, whimsical and kind of whatever. But
I really liked the scene where like this is probably the scene that made you hate the humans. With the kid just like the drunk guy that gets up and he's like yelling at the elf dude, just like, "You get your pointed feet out of here," or whatever the fuck, just some idiot.
yeah, and just, but even the humans on the boat, I mean, they're all just pissy, like, I mean, maybe it's
Mhm.
because maybe that's just a reflection of the way the world actually is, maybe that's how the creators see, um, the
Well, that's the
world, but
thing. They didn't really show enough of it, but when they were going through in the first episode, Galadriel was talking about Morgoth and all that stuff, like the big battle that happened where her brother died and all that. It was kinda glossed over or just kind of implied. They didn't spend much time on it, but, like, the whole reason the elves are here and I like this dynamic between, like, the humans not liking the elves and because the elves are kinda I mean, let's face it, the elves we even saw with Elrond and Durin, like, they're kind of detached from reality, right? Like, they're these,
Mhm.
like, kind of ethereal beings, they just kinda live forever, so they're just removed from the rest of society just naturally. They have a superiority complex in some degree. And I like the dynamic they have where they kind of just see the elves as just like police officers, like who are just like they think they're under like a not a grant like a martial law is essentially what the elves have enforced upon the humans, and like this is kind of glossed over. Like you saw that the elves or the humans don't like the elves because of that, but they did that because a lot of the humans teamed up with Morgoth during that fight. Like so that's why the elves are here, because they're making sure the world of man doesn't do some shady shit again. And like that's
so
the point. Like
so I completely missed that. I
exactly, they don't do a good job about
when
showing
you
that.
yeah, when you went to get your drink, that was one of the things that I talked about was like, I really wish that they would have established why the races interact the way they do. Like, because clearly the humans hate the elves, and like I spent the whole thing going, why the f do they hate the elves? Like what the and they did. I should have picked up on it. I mean, they did say it, but it felt like there would have been better served to do a longer setup about the war with Morgoth. Morgoth? Is that
Yeah, I
was
think it's Morgoth. I think that's the right
so
way to say it.
it would have been better to do a larger explanation of that battle and the repercussions of that battle than it would have, and like, and where everybody stood as it was, they kind of just threw you into it, and you're kind of trying to establish, they're telling you that these relationships exist, but you don't know why. And so that was really kind of
Well, and that's
frustrating.
the other thing, because look at this, right? Like, look at this, and I'll find this in the show, but I'll pull this up for now just so you can see. This is a small picture, but hold on, because we all know what Sauron looks like in his armor from the movie, right?
Hmm.
Like, we all know what he looks like, but then, like, this is Morgoth, right? So, if you remember, like, this is very similar to how Sauron looks, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah.
here's another one. Is another Morgoth here. And now here's the confusing thing, because I mentioned it before when we were talking to dude in the chat about, who the stranger is, right? It could be Gandalf, sure, but it could be Sauron. Like, that's the because when if you remember, when the meteor comes down, or the stranger comes down in meteor form, we'll say, it shows the king elf, and then the king elf sees a leaf fall, and then when he holds the leaf, he sees it turn to black, like rot is kicking in or something, like immediately, like there's some sort of corruption, right? So obviously, that means it could be Sauron. Like, Sauron comes, all bad stuff's happening. That could be possible. Now, the thing is, when you see this dude, like, this is very similar to Sauron. And now in the show, when they did this little montage during the battle, they specifically say Sauron's name right when they show the silhouette of a dude in that armor. So they were obviously talking about the battle with Morgoth and Sauron and whatnot during this monologue. But was that Morgoth they showed, or was it Sauron? Because literally, when they showed that figure, they say Sauron, which is why
Hmm.
I think a lot, which is one of the reasons why this dude could be Sauron, because they've just essentially tricked you into thinking Sauron's already here. But no, that was Morgoth. We just said Sauron at the time just to throw you off. Like, that could be a possibility, is what
Yeah.
pretty much my roundabout way of getting there. That shot, though, I'm trying to find it because it's really cool, and their little skimming feature does not let me skim very well. But I mean, this scene looked cool.
Yeah.
It all looks great. Now, where's the shot? I want the shot of Sauron or Morgoth. Maybe it was earlier than this.
Yeah. I don't. I should be able to remember better, considering I just watched it a couple hours ago. But
Well, like, I know it was, like, somewhere around here, because they
hmm.
showed him, like, coming out of, like, it was, like, right during that battle. It was the only place it could have been. Here, just so I don't get copyright, I'll play the you can look at the tree while I skim through it. But, yeah, I wish they would explain a little bit more of just like, they could like, again, with, like, the elves going into the west, that could be explained a little bit better. That and then another thing that was kinda goofy was, like, that elf who abandoned that, like, the main elf who was, like, asking for Galadriel's hand on the boat was the same elf that tried to convince her to leave, and then was the one that first put his sword down, camera on him, like, and it's like, "We're not going any further." So, like, this dude essentially enacted the betrayal of the rest of the company against her, but then, like, they're just cool with each other right after that.
Yeah.
Like, then, like, they all went back, they were on the boat together, just
Well,
kinda goofy.
and then there's the whole discussion between the king elf and what's his name,
Elrond.
Elrond. The discussion about sometimes the wind that's going to blow out the fire ends up spreading it. How she's going to how she can end up causing Sauron to gain power
Yeah.
versus not. So, like, it's almost feels like they sent her away to try and save things, to keep her,
Well,
um,
that's the thing too. It seemed
from
like
making things worse.
yeah, exactly. But it also seemed like in those same conversations, and then after the fact, it might have been that same conversation, but where when Elrond was talking to the king, he also kind of implied there, at least to me, that he believes Galadriel. Like like he that like and Elrond even says like he's
Yeah,
chosen to honor you and your company as opposed to whatever, like punish them in any way, shape, or form. So like you have that, and then that conversation really implied that like he does understand and believe that what she's doing in a way is the right thing to do. So like he knows that Sauron is still a threat, but in this case, he just wants to like lay low and not kind of do what Viserys does, right? Like Viserys doesn't want to start a war. Like he's just like he's like
he must move the chess pieces where they need to be to prevent to and make
yeah.
things play out the way he wants. Yeah,
Yeah, like, Chorus Valerian is like, "Yo, we gotta go deal with the crab feeder, like, this is gonna disrupt our trade routes, it's gonna disrupt my trade route in particular, but it's gonna disrupt our trade routes." You know, like, this crab feeder dude, he's united 3 of the cities, the free cities, and they call themselves a triarchy now, like, "This is a big fucking deal, we need to go kill these people." And then Viserys is like, I don't wanna open war," and then he's like, "Yo, if we don't, it's gonna make the crown look weak. Like we have to enact our power at some point in time, which is kind of the situation they find themselves in right now to some degree. Because like the king elf dude is just like, we just need to like just let things lie for a bit. It's been some time. Like it's been centuries and we haven't even found any like trace of Sauron. We're just gonna like essentially ignore it. That's where we are now, which obviously proves to be a bad decision. Here's that shot though. Let me turn the sound on just for this. Hope that because I want to hear them say Sauron here.
Devoted servant, a cruel
yeah.
and
It sounds like
cunning
coming through for
sorcerer.
us. So
They called him Sauron.
They called him Sauron. So this is Sauron.
okay,
And like you can that's definitely Sauron's helmet. That's literally pretty much exactly what it looked like when he got his finger cut off with the ring. But at the same time, I mean, obviously it's like, well, could they have been fucking with us? Could that have been
yeah,
Morgoth? Since, you know, they
similar.
were they were talking about Morgoth the whole time up until like this point.
There's a
That
not
dude,
to
he's fucking huge too.
yeah. See how big dude. Not to jump too far off topic or switch topics on you too much, but there's an article on CNBC that says Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power was watched by more than 25 million globally, according to Amazon. However, the article says Amazon said Saturday that the first episode of its Lord of the Rings of Power series attracted over 25 million viewers globally in its first day, making it the biggest debut for a show on Prime Video streaming service. All very good news for Amazon. I'm sure that they were happy with that. Very interesting to me that the article points out that the first episode was watched by 25 million. That makes me wonder how many of those 25 million stuck around for the second episode.
No, that's a fair point.
Like that's some interesting wording considering they dropped. I would have thought that it would have been, hey, 25 million people watched our debut episodes, plural of the series. I'm wondering how many retained out of that 25 million. That's a huge number for I mean for this article came out 4 hours ago. They said that this was Amazon said this on Saturday. So I mean the episodes had only been out a little over 24, 36 hours by the time they announced this information. So that's huge numbers, of course. 25 million globally um, for one day, 1.5 days worth of viewing. I'm sure it will only rise. People like me didn't watch it until today, so
Well, that's the thing too. Look at this. House of the Dragon,
yeah,
20 million.
yep.
And then right after that, they announced they were going to do season 2 officially, even though they were obviously going to do it. But I guess if
Sure.
nobody watched it, they would have canceled it. But I mean, yeah, for it to get 25 million, that's still pretty decent. But it is interesting, not pretty decent. I'd love for this video to get 25 million views. Don't get me wrong. But
Yeah, we did all right. 25 million.
yeah, that's fine. But it is funny that I wonder if the slowness of, because we're obviously not the only people talking about the first episode, right? I've heard that from a lot of people who thought the
Mhm.
first episode was kind of slow, kind of dull. And like I've even seen people say both episodes are kind of dull, and I wouldn't argue and it's just because of like I said, like you don't understand the motivations of the characters. You don't even understand where the show's going yet. Like after 2 episodes of House of the Dragon, you understand everyone's motivations. You have an idea of where the show is going, and like you're just in for it. So much so that it doesn't even bother you that they jumped 6 months into the future in
Yeah.
episode 2, and you were still right there. You knew
Yes.
exactly what was going on. Didn't take you out. And then tomorrow, they're going to jump years ahead. And I
Mhm.
guarantee you're going to be fine with it. It'll make sense because they just, I mean, knock on wood, it could still go downhill from here. You never know. But it's just because they focus on just the characters. So like they get you caught up just through the dialogue that the characters have with everyone else, and then you understand everything. You have a small council meeting, and they're talking about all the events that are going on in the kingdom, but then through that, you're understanding kind of where everyone's coming from just based on how they answer the questions because they throw in a couple like more personal lines. Like, well, I don't want to do that because XYZ things going on right now. Oh, now you're caught up. Like just like that. It's done. I don't know. Nevertheless, I want the show to be good.
Mhm.
I want it to be good, and I really hope that we get some actually cool stuff with Sauron. Like, I want to see some. Y'all spent too much money making this show, so if we don't see some like cool shit, like I'm gonna be kind of upset. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie, because if you're gonna go high fantasy and you're gonna spend just an obscene amount of money, I wanna see, like, some anime level, like, intensity fights. Like, I honestly thought that, like, what we saw for the big battle scenes were kind of lackluster. Even
Yeah. I'll agree.
I didn't expect a big, highly choreographed big battle in episode 1 or 2 by any means, but even with the flashback scene, like, they didn't show anything. Like, I would have imagined something like, especially given the amount of money they spent, like, and they wanna pull you in and, like, really set themselves apart from Game of Thrones, then lean more into the fantasy stuff and do more of the like, that kind of thing, because that's not what Game of Thrones focuses on. They focus on the story and the characters, so I would have imagined, like, that scene with, like, her brother, like, this should have been like the Battle of the Bastards. That's what
Yeah.
I wanted to feel like when they were showing this. Like, I wanted the camera in there with her brother, seeing him being like a badass. Because like, I don't like, we don't care about the brother. Like, we saw him for 2 seconds, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, they just show him here, stab a couple people, and then he just gets they just show this one single wide shot, and then the thing ends. So, like, you see your brother for a couple of seconds, you see this big wide shot. Just before this, you see a dragon and an eagle collapse to the ground, and that's all you saw, though. I wanted some, like, Battle of the Bastards, man. Like, the dude should have been Jon Snow in that scene, just, like, fighting through all these orcs, and you should have seen, like, Morgoth being a badass in the background, these dragons doing their thing, and it's like, you spend, like, 5 minutes just showing us, like, why this was a big deal. You know, because
Yeah.
like, they didn't even give us that in Lord of the Rings. So it would've been cool to see at least see, like, something. Because like, even, like, the Lord of this was very equivalent to the Lord of the Rings, like, prologue, but
Yeah.
I feel like they just, like, shoulda went a little bit bigger with it given the scope of the show. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, that's just kind of a nitpick, though. I just thought this was kinda 'cause to Rob's earlier point, they could have just started with this scene and it would have been better. So the fact that this scene wasn't kinda longer and more exciting just kinda lends more to the point that we didn't really need all the stuff leading up to it. They could have just been like, "Here's this," and then move on. Like, "This is what happened. Goodbye." I don't know. Anything else stand out to you, though? I don't know if I'm
Oh, we cover. Yeah, I really,
trying to think.
it's going to be easy to watch this and come away from it with thinking that I didn't like the show because there was a lot I had issues with. But I mean, I haven't considered not continuing to watch it yet, so it's not. It can't be that terrible. There were like I said, there were aspects I enjoyed in the second half of it. So um, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm by no means not gonna watch it. I mean, it'd have to get really bad. And I mean, honestly, like we said, like, the big visuals and the wide shots are almost enough to watch it in its own
Oh,
right.
sure.
Like, 'cause they look great, like, even, like, just as, like, mountainscape with them just, like, pushing into the shot of them climbing was just
Yeah.
cool to watch, like, it just looks great.
Hmm.
Like, there's nothing that doesn't look great about it.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the, like, more, like, closer up shots don't they kind of feel more like a TV show in some ways, but, like, in I don't know, I think it looks really good.
I did
Like,
too.
it's really good to watch. And, oh, yeah, the one thing I love the scene with the Harfoots, like, emerging, like,
Yep.
showing, that scene right there, where they, like,
Mm.
come out of their little, like, hiding places and stuff.
Yep.
I thought that was cool. Like, and
That was.
it sets them apart from the hobbits and stuff too, right? Because like, they're not the same, and it shows because like, hobbits are real, like, real formal, they're, like, real neat people, like, they have little houses, and, like, they're finely dressed, and they stay in the Shire, right? They just stay there. But, like, these guys, they travel, they're on the move. They're really creative with where they're, like, making their camps and stuff, like, I thought that was really cool.
Mhm.
But, yeah. So what's your best guess then on the stranger? Who is he? Who you got for it?
I mean, my only 2 guesses were Saruman and Gandalf, so, I mean, I feel like it's Gandalf just because once that reveal comes, it immediately ties everything together and, like, invests you more in the story because, "Oh, here's the character that I know."
Right.
Um, not knowing the being somebody who's had their fandom different genres mess with as far as continuity goes, uh, and what's already been established. If it's not supposed to be Gandalf in the books, if it's supposed to be somebody else, then I hope they don't change it just for the sake of making it fan service or whatever. I hope that they stay, true to what fans expect. Because me as a kind of what would you call us, novice viewer or
Just casual Lord of the Rings?
casual Lord of the Rings fan, I, I don't need it to be Gandalf to make it important. I need them. It's a cheap way to make something important just by switching the character. If they can make the character just as important and just as invest I can invest in it just as easily if it's who it's supposed to be as long as they write it well. So like I don't switch it to Gandalf just to make me like, oh, this is awesome. It's Gandalf. I know Gandalf. Gandalf fought the Balrog, and like, you shall not pass. Of course, yeah, this is great.
Mhm.
I mean, if it's supposed to be somebody else, make it somebody else and just write it well. Like, do the
Right.
work.
Well, that's the thing, because like, because we know who Gandalf is, and we know Saruman, and we met Radagast, like, we met 3 of the wizards in the other movies,
Yeah.
so this could be a completely different wizard. It doesn't have to be Gandalf, and like I said, timeline-wise, it shouldn't be Gandalf, but I'm fine if they make a Gandalf, especially if it allows them to. Because there's the thing, kind of to your point, like they could just do it to be fan service and like make you just understand who it is and like whatever, and it would inherently break continuity, sure. But at the flip side of that, given what I was talking about with like the public domain kind of rights that they kind of live in right now, simply making it Gandalf would allow them to tell a much more canon story to like the Similarian than they would if they used the people who are supposed to be there. Because just by them changing the characters, they could then have them play out those events, but it technically wouldn't be them using those events at that point because
Yeah,
it's different.
different
Now it's
stories.
yeah, they're telling an event that kind of happened in the Similarian or other material, but because they're using different characters, it can play out differently, and it just inherently is differently. So it's a really cheeky way for them to be able to pretty much be able to tell a story they're not allowed to tell
Mhm.
because now it's not that story because they're making it all these other characters instead. So it
Yeah.
could really go both ways, honestly. Do you think? I guess the last thing I could really think of here with this is what's in the box. What's in the box?
Yeah, I don't know.
My
And
guess
and
is
and
Mithril.
here's the worst part about it. I don't care. Like,
True.
I don't care right now. Like, that's what this that actually really that scene bugged me because you have given us no reason why we care what's in the box, and
Mhm.
yet you're gonna use that as a cliffhanger? Like, it's just a cliffhanger just because it's a cliffhanger. Like, anybody can do that. We could end this stream with me going, hey, I've got this thing, and then like I'm gonna reveal what it is, and like start to open it, and then we cut the stream. Oh well, okay, then everybody's gotta come back next stream to see what the heck I was talking about. Like it's cheap.
Yeah,
And
because
yeah,
we're not invested in it. We don't know because that's the thing. Up until this point, we were not aware of the dwarves and why they would be hiding anything to begin with, right? Like we don't know. So it's kind of dumb in that way because it's like, well, what is so secretive? And it's really making whatever's in the box like artificially meaningful because we just have no bearing on like what sort of we have no idea what it could possibly be to begin with. We could guess, but it bars no impact on the story because we can't even make an assumption on it being anything that would impact the story because we don't know what the fucking story is yet. Like, and I think that's probably the worst part about the show as far as how it was executed was that like after 2 hours, we don't know really where it's going.
yeah.
Like we ultimately, because we know what events they're telling, yeah, we know where the overall plot is going to eventually lead to, but that's not a good excuse. Like that's not an excuse for watching 2 hours of something and having a lot of questions,
Mhm,
right? And like, yeah, I can try to connect as much as I want to the source material, but the job of the show is to present their story and make me understand their story. And I don't think they did a really great job at that. They did a great job with the visuals. They did good with a couple of the characters, primarily Elrond and Durin. But then at the same time, with this scene, it makes you kind of question Durin again. Because like at first, you when we meet Durin, he's like all mad at Elrond, but then he's got a lot of love for Elrond, and like they're all cool at the end of it, and like they're best buds again. But then now he's got this big secret from Elrond this whole time, so he's being shitty to Elrond, but then simultaneously is in cahoots with his father, keeping secrets from the elves.
yeah.
So it kind of makes him kind of like I don't know, a little bit selfish. And then I guess the only other thing I could comment on is the elf dude, I forget his name, that meets up with Elrond initially, right? Who goes with him to the dwarf kingdom. That dude is a pretty important elf. Uh
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The guy he's working under now.
yeah, the guy the king put in there with.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, he makes the elvish rings, the elvish rings of power. So, because that's the other like quote unquote cliffhanger. That one I'll leave it be because they at least said like I want to make a big forge, so you kind of know what the hell that is. Like that's fine. See, it would have been different if they would have. That's the thing with this stupid dwarf opening the box. They should have just shown what was in the box. That would have been a much better thing to do in that situation, in my opinion. They should have had him open the box, camera goes down on the box, and then we see that they are keeping whatever that is a secret and then move on. Because I doubt we're going to just, I mean, we might, but like the relevance of that being in the box, who knows? Like it might be just kind of a stupid thing. It might be something that doesn't really impact the story too much, which would kind of lean into your point of it being just like a cliffhanger for the sake of being a cliffhanger. Because if it has no bearing on the story, what kind is the point there, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, you got anything else? That's pretty
No.
much my thoughts on it. I mean, I liked it. I hope it has a continual increase in quality. As you mentioned, the first episode, we both are kind of meh, but then the second episode, I think we both agree is better, and it was a more enjoyable watch.
Yeah.
So I hope it continues, but I hope it like is a bigger step forward than than this first episode because neither of them blew me out of the water. Like
No.
tomorrow on the House of the Dragon after show, I expect to have good things to say because that's just what I've come to expect from those shows, right? Like I don't know, I've never been really until the later seasons of Game of Thrones. I never walked away from an episode of Game of Thrones with these many questions, right? I always knew what was going on. You the cliffhangers are good cliffhangers because they're natural stopping points, like you said. Like, so I just hope this show gets to that point where at the end of the episode, I feel satisfied as a viewer. I feel like I know where everything's going. And I don't need to know everything. Like, I mean, I'm not just like an idiot who needs things spelled out for me. It's just generally I like to, if I'm just going to invest 2 hours of my time, I would like to know what I'm watching. And at this
Mhm.
point, I can't definitively say what is what. Like, explain to me what happened in these 2 episodes. What's if you're gonna sell me? I'm someone who hasn't watched this show. You've seen the first 2 episodes. What's your selling point? What's your pitch to get people to watch it? Like, if you got to tell me about the show, like, what
Yeah, I
could you
don't know.
say? Like,
I mean, it's pretty.
yeah, it
It
looks
looks good.
good.
It
That's
looks good.
that's literally the first thing that comes to mind. Is like, well, it looks good.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I
I
will I
can't
will
really
say
explain much more.
I will say this. I don't I don't know that I'm trying to find a way to say this that doesn't it feels like Lord of the Rings.
It
The
does.
the set design, the way it's shot, everything, like, it feels like Lord of the Rings, so I guess that's a positive. Um,
You feel like you get transported into Middle Earth. I think they did a
yeah,
good job with that,
yeah, yeah,
especially with the best thing they did for that, and this also helps with the scale and the scope of the show, was when they cut to a wide shot, oftentimes they'd show you the map first, right? So you see the map and the camera pans over the map, but then the camera zooms into the map and then you go into the wide shot of the mountain that like that makes it feel big.
yeah,
And then like it transports you like literally visually transports you into the world by virtue of going into a map and then now you're there. So that definitely lends itself to it. His name's like Kalamanmar or something. Kalamanmar? Whatever his name. He makes stuff though for the elves. So I mean he makes the three elvish rings, I'm pretty sure. And
okay,
the three elvish rings of power, if you do not know, were able to withstand, like they were immune to the corruption from the like Sauron. Like, so I if I'm remembering correctly, I don't know, like I said, I didn't read the books, but I think like they could use the elvish rings of power freely without being corrupted and controlled by Sauron and the One Ring. I think that was the caveat with those rings. But I think the problem was Sauron could still like see them if they were using the rings. That's why they didn't use the rings during the Third Age to like fight back because Sauron could was still linked to them, but they were still free of like corruption from Sauron. I think. Don't quote me, but I think that's how they worked, and that's why they were kind of like cool in some ways. But I don't know. It could be the opposite, and they could just use them freely. I don't know. I don't really remember.
Yeah.
So it sounds half right in my head, but I don't know. That was good. I hope it gets better though. You got any closing thoughts? You got anything else you want to talk about? You want to wrap it up? It's about midnight at this point.
Yeah, I think I'm winding down here. I'm losing steam as we get later. So
Well, and that's the thing. The no, I'm not gonna say that. I was gonna say, well, the show didn't help. Like Lord of the Rings, like it just doesn't really get you. No, but that's not fair. It's
yeah,
good. I'm sure if I don't know. I remember when I first got finished watching it, though, I was just kind of like, okay, like
I will say this: it's a good thing they released 2 episodes because if I had ended on the first episode, it would have been like, whew. I mean,
yeah.
I don't have much to say about it. I don't have anything good to say about it
I think
except
they
for
would
it
have.
looks good.
Yeah, I think they would have lost some people. Like I really do think you would have. I think people if they only released the first episode, I would not have been surprised if a lot of people did not watch the second one as soon as it dropped and waited to hear what people thought, and then maybe waited 2 or 3 more episodes to hear what people were saying about it.
Or even waited till the series was all out completely, and
Yeah,
then, you know, it's
right.
I almost hesitate to bring this up because it is late, but it's interesting to me that Amazon is still taking the 1 a week. I guess the 1 a week episode gives them, um, longevity as far as the social conversation about the series goes.
Mhm.
But in terms of a subscription-based service, Amazon, with it being part of Prime and Prime Video, and like I doubt Prime is the sort of video service where a lot of people would drop in and out because most
Oh,
people it
yeah.
seems like have Prime for the other benefits along with the video service. So it's in a way it's interesting that they are, but I guess it does keep the social conversation about the series going longer than if they just dropped it all at once.
It does. That's why we're gonna see Netflix. They already have started experimenting with doing that, and they're gonna
Yeah,
eventually, if they don't do weekly, they're gonna start doing like 3 episodes a week. And I think they're gonna eventually get down to the 1 episode a week thing because they saw the immediate return with Stranger Things in their second half
yeah,
because everyone watched the first half, but then because they've had like that 1 month break, everyone was still hype about seeing like the last bit of it. So their viewership for that finale, those last episodes for the second half, was through the fucking roof because it was out there long enough for people to get caught up with it. The word of mouth spread, and then there was good word of mouth because it was good, and you had these other things coming, and then bada bing, bada boom, you get massive viewership. So,
yeah,
but I do like Amazon in the sense that I feel like they have to do that in some ways because they really don't have a lot of Amazon original shows, ironically. Like, even as big as they are, they don't have a lot of content. Like, they have content, but they have like The Boys and like a couple other things, but they had like The Man in High Castle for a while, but that was like kind of the only thing they had for quite some time. So just because they don't have a lot of stuff, I feel like it does do better for them just to do it week by week, but I do like that, like with The Boys, they kinda always drop the first 3 episodes of the season and then move on, and I think that is honestly the best method for anybody to do any shows in any season, whether it's your 5th season or your 1st season. I think you should drop 2 or 3 episodes for your season starter because it gets people invested. Like, if they would have only dropped the first episode of this, I think it would have lost a lot of people. The second one brought a lot of people back. Imagine if they would have had a third episode here, like they do with the boys. Like, that would have been a lot better. Imagine She-Hulk. If they would have done the first 3 episodes of She-Hulk, they still would have had 6 weeks left to do this, and after the 3rd episode, you feel like you finally have a really good idea what the show is, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's it. That's the last ramble bit I got. We can sign off here. John, you got anything else you wanna add? If not, let the good people know where they can find you online.
Over at the Twitter's Nightwing_J. That's gonna be where I post most stuff. So
You can follow me just simply at Sir Rob Bifo here on all platforms. Stay tuned. We will be back tomorrow unless anything comes up, John. We're doing the House of
oh wait,
Dragon
come back
after
to me.
show tomorrow. Yeah, we're doing the
Big
House of
stretch.
Dragon tomorrow, right?
Yes, yeah. Plan on doing that after
Good deal.
for you to watch.
See, I'm excited for that, dude.
Oh yeah,
Episode
definitely.
3 of that. Very stoked for that. So come back tomorrow, probably around like 10, probably closer to 10:30, given those are hour-long episodes. Get some stuff situated for the stream and whatnot. But we'll be doing the House of Dragon after show then. And then, I mean, now that this show's out, we'll probably be doing. We've been streaming every Friday anyway, just to talk about She-Hulk and any of the other news that was coming out throughout the week. So now we'll be able to potentially, assuming we can get all the episodes watched in time, we can do a after show for this every week on Fridays as well. So stick around for that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Go ahead and like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and then we'll see you in the next video.